أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. On behalf of Harrow Central Mosque, I welcome you all to this very beautiful course to be run by our head of education, Ustad Muhammad Ahmed, who needs no introduction. I think many of you already know him. He has been running these sort of courses for many years now. And alhamdulillah, I was privileged enough to join one of his courses before, and I hope you all learn a lot. This is a very useful course, and we feel very honored to be able to host this. Jazakallah khair.
Firstly, Jazakallah khair for everyone who's made the effort to come here today for this course. No doubt, whether isn't what is supportive and conducive for traveling, but nevertheless, everyone was much brave today to be here. We tried to start at the time that was given, that was 1:30, but because of the weather, people were still coming due to some parking issues, we decided to delay it for a few minutes, but not delay it too much. It's very important for us to understand the importance of this course, and I will only say a few words on that, because today is all about the practical element of giving ghusl to the deceased and also shrouding the deceased. As you can see, our center today is all geared up to make it practical and to instill confidence in people to give ghusl to their deceased loved ones. This is one of those courses where you won't benefit yourself personally, because it's logical that then people can't give ghusl themselves. But what we can do is to help and assist in giving ghusl to those of our loved ones who have passed away. Alhamdulillah, we're very fortunate here to have a very dedicated team of both brothers and sisters side who are volunteering to give ghusl to the deceased, make it and fulfilling their communal obligation, which takes the sin or the responsibility of sin off the community for not being able to produce people that can give ghusl to the deceased individual. But the point that I'd like to make, and that is from my years of experience, when a loved one passes away, and if you're standing there helpless, then that memory will live with you for the rest of your life. I have seen young men crying beside their father who has passed away, with tears rolling down their eyes, unaware as to what to do, how to perform ghusl. And I've also seen children who actually abstain from getting involved in giving ghusl to their deceased father or grandfather. This is what society does. We feel that the relationship is until the person is living, and as soon as the person has left this dunya, we feel that there is no more relationship there, and we expect others to fulfill this obligation. We fear to accept our own responsibilities and that religious obligation that is imposed upon us to fulfill the final rights of our parents. This could be with regards to performing ghusl for our deceased loved ones, performing and giving kafan to our deceased loved ones, and also offering salat janazah for our deceased loved ones. Many times you see people's eyeballs rolling in salat janazah, unaware of what they should be doing, unaware of what they should be reading and reciting, and totally unaware as to how they can help the deceased after they passed away. Alhamdulillah, we managed to create an 8-week course where week by week we speak of different aspects surrounding and concerning death. But today we have one segment of that is the practical element of how we should help wash our deceased loved ones, but also our brethren within the deen of Islam. I can assure you that if it is you that is practicing and learning how to give ghusl to the mayyit, that is only for your own family, then no doubt when your family member has passed away, then you will be standing there and all this information will be lost. The only way to keep this information, keep this knowledge, is if you be one of those individuals who volunteers for the Muslim Ummah and for the Muslim community. You say to those who are responsible that if there is a Muslim brother who passes away, then please inform us and we would like to watch. If there is a Muslim sister who passes away, then let us know. We want to watch, we want to help, and we want to assist. By practically getting involved, that is how you learn, and that is what prepares you for when your loved one leaves this dunya, then you can fulfill their rights in the way that you leave content. There is no doubt that when a person leaves this dunya, the void that is left within the heart and the soul is one that can never be fulfilled. Often you will hear that time is a healer. It isn't. Ask an individual who has lost a mother or a father if time is a healer. Ask someone who has lost a best friend if time is a healer. Ask a husband who has lost his wife if time is a healer. Or ask a wife when she has lost her husband if time is a healer, and they will say, no, it's not a healer. The void will always remain. But the deen of Islam prepares a person, because we have reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the life of the barzakh, and we have from the deen of Islam that great union that we will have in the barzakh with our loved ones who have passed away, and this gives us some solace. And then how we will get together on the day of Qiyamah, and inshallah ta'ala how we enter into Jannah together also. So it's very, very important that we learn some of these aspects. And today I won't give a long or lengthy introduction, but the last point that I will say is that as believers, it is a soul that we work for, but the body has some rights. Today inshallah we'll discuss some of those last rights of the body before we place it into the grave. When it comes to the ghusl element, then there are certain things that we need to keep in mind. The way that I'd like to do this particular session is first and foremost to go through the session in itself. Once I've gone through the session, then there are some stations that we've placed around the sides. I will ask people to get in groups of 6, one person, or groups of 7, one person to lie on the tables, and we're not taking any responsibility for any broken tables. So please be careful on that. One person to lie on the tables, and then I will go instruction by instruction so that everyone is following at the same time, and it's a very practical session that we have so that people leave today's session with confidence as to what takes place when giving ghusl to a mayyit. And also then after the salah inshallah we'll also speak about the kafan in itself and how to give kafan to the mayyit. So some of the things that we have here is first and foremost, giving ghusl to the mayyit is a communal obligation. If there is a few people within the community that can give ghusl to the mayyit, then the responsibility is raised upon the entire community. But if there is no one who can give ghusl to the mayyit, then the entire community will be at sin for not having any individual who is proficient in giving ghusl to the mayyit. So this is a communal obligation. Then the second point is that washing the body once is fard. Okay, to wash it 3 times is masnoon. Therefore, if a mayyit was placed in water, according to the Hanafi mazhab, if it was a large area of water, or if it was running water and the mayyit was placed inside it and then taken out, the responsibility of ghusl will be fulfilled. The people who are washing, and again we'll go into the details of that, first condition that we say is that they should be in wudu. Remember, I don't say that it is obligatory for them to be in a state of wudu. I don't say it is necessary. I say that it is recommended that they are in a state of wudu. Another point to keep in mind, and these are matters of fiqh that I'm just summarizing for yourselves. When giving a ghusl, we should ensure that we know that this is a place of washing, it's a place of where we relieve ourselves or the deceased is relieved of any ritual impurities. Therefore, it is not a place of Quran recitation, it is not a place of making dhikr or making tahleel or making tasbihat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For males, the only thing that is permissible is to say Allahumma ghfir lahu, or Allah forgive him. And for females, it is Allahumma ghfir laha. The two pronouns are what changes for the male and for the female. This is the dua that a person who is giving ghusl to the mayyit, this is what it should be upon his tongue, asking and seeking forgiveness for the deceased individual. This also comes in line with the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to his companions, when any one of you dies, then say good things about him. Because by saying good things about him, the angels say Ameen to the du'as that are made for the deceased. So get into a habit of making good du'as and saying good things about the deceased, because at that time, appointed angels are sent in order to say Ameen when a person leaves this dunya. It's disliked for sisters to give ghusl whilst in a state of ritual impurity, meaning if they are going through nifas or menstruation haid. Okay? Or if they have had a child and they're going through postnatal bleeding, then in a state such as that, it is disliked for them to give ghusl to the mayyit if other sisters are present. Okay? If other sisters are present. If there are no other sisters present, then they can give ghusl to the deceased individual. Okay? I will be taking questions inshallah towards the end. If you have any questions, you can make a note, write them down. Inshallah ta'ala, we have a program that starts about 5 o'clock after, so I'm available until 5 o'clock. Some people will have questions that are private, more than happy to take them. If you want to ask a question in a gathering, then please do so. It'll just delay things a little, but nevertheless, it's important that you leave satisfied rather than leave here with still questions wanting to be answered. In addition to that, more excellent for the washer to be of a close relationship. Okay, and this is an important point that I would like to make. Alhamdulillah, the volunteers are amazing. They're very diligent, they're very responsible, and alhamdulillah, they are very experienced. But the love that you have for your child, or your child has for you, that is not something that can be replaced by a volunteer. The sensitivity of the body of the deceased is such that the Sharia mentions that even the push or the pull of a strand of hair is felt directly by the soul. And this is why the Deen requires us to be even more sensitive after the person has passed away. The essence of a human being is the soul. The pain is felt by the soul. The tranquility is felt by the soul. But the body is only the carrier. Now that the soul has separated from the body, the soul feels the pain directly. This is why the scholars say that now the soul has become more sensitive than when it was within the body. Which is why it has to be carefully handled. So much so that even brushing or combing the beard after a person has passed away, the scholars say it's not permissible. Because the tugging of the hair upon the beard is something that the soul will feel directly as pain. And it's another interesting point that I often make, and people tend to not be able to relate to it much, simply because there's been a few generations. But from my brothers that are linked with the subcontinent, and my sisters who are linked with the subcontinent, I usually ask the question as to if you remember what type of hairstyle your grandmother or great-grandmother had. And most of you of that age will say that they had a center partition. Any nods? Yes? No? Correct. Yeah, correct. Okay. They would have a center partition and they would have a plait at the back. The reason they would have that hairstyle, and this was across the board, the entire village, let alone the village, the entire country, and the women of the entire country would have the same hairstyle. And the reason why is because when their soul was to be departed from their body, then it was the plaits that were undone and the hair were placed over their chest, meaning that the hair didn't need pulling and tugging. This is the level of taqwa that that generation of people had. Because when a female dies and ghusl is given to her, then her hair is taken, and from the middle, half of it comes around the back and over one side of her chest, and the other half comes over the other side and comes over the chest. So they didn't have the types of hairstyles where it required for the hair to be separated and departed from both ways, because it required pulling and tugging. This was the level of sensitivity that they understood. And traditionally and culturally, it supported the deen of Islam and the principles of the deen of Islam, therefore they enhanced it and made it regular. So pulling and tugging, the Sharia mentions even if a nail is cut, but half of it is still upon the nail, then do not pull that nail off because it hurts the mayyit. There is no trimming, no shaving that is permissible after the soul has left the body. So these things we have to be very, very careful about, and we have to be very, very sensitive. And the family members can do that. The family members can assist. And no doubt, a learned person, a volunteer can be present, and the children should take the responsibility. The next of kin should take responsibility. The first cousins should take responsibility. And those people that can be present, inshallah we'll mention this, but just mentioning it now, is that those people that are close relatives who can take some assistance from an imam or a volunteer, they should take instructions, and they can take instructions at the time to ensure that the ghusl is complete for the deceased individual. But the handling of the mayyit, that should be done by the family members. In addition, if they are not familiar, they may learn at the same time. And the last point that is mentioned, and that is that the washer, or those people that are present, should be people of the Sharia. They should be people of taqwa, people of piety, people of salah, people of God-fearness. And the reason for that is, based upon the deceased, there will be many things that you notice upon the body of that individual. And there are many different examples that can be given. There could be someone who's been stabbed, could be someone who's been shot, there could be someone who was strangled, there could be someone who was afflicted with fire, there could be someone who has multiple injuries because of a car accident. So the examples are plenty, and the body can come in different forms. Therefore, nothing of that should be narrated to the outside community. No one should speak about how deep the wounds were. No one should speak about how the condition of the skin was on the body. No one should speak about the facial figures. And no doubt, when it comes to matters of Aqidah, we find that the deceased individual, an individual who lived his life according to the Aqidah of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'at, an individual who loves Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who loves the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam, who loves the Sahaba, who loves the Ahlul Bayt, who loves the Awliya Kiram, when the time of his death comes, these are those individuals whose souls are presented in front of him. And when he sees those souls, and this is Imam Suyuti rahimahullah who mentions this, the book's name is Sharh al-Sudur fi Halat al-Mawt wal-Qabul. Imam Suyuti rahimahullah is known as Shaykh al-Islam, an individual who is accepted as a muhaddith of the deen of Islam. In this book, he specifically mentions these things as to why is it that when some people's souls are extracted from their bodies, you will see them smiling. And some people, when their soul is taken from out of their body, you will see their faces disfigure. Their facial color changes. It becomes dark and it becomes gloomy. Because that is the way that they live their life. And no doubt at that very moment when the soul is extracted, it is mentioned that souls of their loved ones, souls that they were familiar with, they come with the angel of death in order to extract the soul from the body. And when he sees that, he expresses happiness because he feels content, knowing that these were the loved ones that were around him in this dunya. Now they are the ones that have come to take his soul. And then he looks forward to going into the next realm because of what he sees. And those are the individuals upon whose faces you see nur. You see light upon their faces. You see them smiling, and their souls are extracted from their bodies. But those people who lived in enmity, you'd find that those are the people who hide their faces, because there's nothing to show, except there is gloom upon their faces, there's darkness upon their faces, and their faces disfigure. And the reason why they disfigure is because of the angels who come to extract their soul from their body are such that it instills so much fear that the expression of that fear is the disfigurement of their faces. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He gives us a death on Iman, one that is filled with love of Allah and His Rasul alayhi salatu wa taslim, such that when the time for our death comes, we see these beautiful faces, and then that makes us smile. When it comes to the actual ghusl, before we move on to that, it's important that the washer should narrate the good signs of the deceased individual. And you will see beautiful signs coming from the deceased individual. I've seen my own self of people who have passed away and they are smiling. I've seen people myself, when they die, their finger is like this. Right? The shahada finger is seen. Okay? Now this is a very difficult thing to see upon an individual who is experiencing death. Why? Because you will most likely see this. The reason why you see this is because this is the closest position to express pain. Okay, this is the closest reason to express pain. Why do you think the mouth opens as soon as the soul leaves the body? This is from the signs of death. Imam Ghazali rahimahullah mentions because of shock. Okay. Today you find this when a person has an extreme form of shock, the first thing you'll see is that his mouth opens up. You'll see that the eyes open and they roll back. The reason why the eyes open and they roll back, the scholar says, because when the soul is extracted, it's extracted from the feet, through the shins and the knees up to the waist, from the waist up to the chest and to the throat. As it gets to the throat, that is when the angel yanks the soul over the face, and as it takes the soul out of the throat, over the face, the eyes follow the departure of the soul, hence the eyes roll back and they open up. So from amongst the first things that we do to the deceased is we close the eyes. And the pain is such that the hands become in a fist-like, and this is one of the reasons why the feet open up and we close the feet together. This is all because of the shock that the body experiences, the physical shock of the body. So it's important to ensure that we look at the good signs of the deceased and we tell people, so that people can then go and say, okay, what was it that your loved one done in their life? What action did they do that Allah gave them a beautiful end? And then people will say, my father, my husband, he would recite Quran every morning. He would recite salawat 100,000 times a day. He would recite the tahleel so many times. He would make sure that he would recite Surah Mulk. He was someone who was attached to the masjid, someone who was attached to the Quran, someone who would make salawat upon the Prophet ﷺ. There were some good things. He was a person who was charitable, gave charity. And today you see that in his death. These are beautiful signs that you see. Similarly, you'll see people whose caskets are easy to lift, and then you'll find people whose caskets are very difficult to lift. The scholars say that those people whose caskets are easy to lift, those are the individuals who went and lifted other deceased individuals. When you go to the masjid and you help lift the deceased, the casket, you lift it, you raise it, you take it from the hearse into the masjid, from the masjid into the hearse, you help and go to the graveyard, and then you lift it again and lower it into the grave. The Prophet ﷺ said, the one who gets involved in all of these processes, when he dies, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends angels to lift his bier. Allah sends angels to lift his casket, and his casket becomes lighter. And then those who don't get involved in things like the raising of the bier, the raising of the casket for other Muslims, but they are engrossed in their sin, there may be someone who's physically very light, but his casket will be very difficult. Their sins bring the casket and the weight of it down. This is why many of you have heard Emotionally, they say that the heaviest caskets are those of children, but they speak of that from an emotional perspective, not from a physical perspective. So no doubt getting involved is very, very important. Then men should wash men and women should wash women. Okay? And then when it comes to the children, either of the genders can get involved, but it is recommended that if there's a young girl who passes away, then the women should give ghusl to the young girl. And as for a boy, if he hasn't reached the age of maturity, then men should give ghusl to that child. A lady during her days of hayd or nifas dies, then one ghusl is sufficient. Okay, one ghusl is sufficient. You do not have to give multiple ghusls to a female. A wife can give ghusl to her late husband, but not the other way around. Okay, a wife can. And the reason why this is simply because the wife is still in the marriage contract. The wife is still in the marriage contract. She's still in her iddah, she's still married to him until her iddah period finishes. Whereas the man, if he was to die, whereas the woman, if she was to die, then the nikah is finished. Okay? Straight away the nikah is finished, therefore he cannot touch or kiss his wife or deceased wife. Okay? This is why it's generally recommended for men that they express their love for their wives whilst they're still alive. Okay? Yes?
When you say the one who gave ghusl to her late husband, when they're doing the ghusl, does that mean that no one else can be there? You know, that males allowed to be there or females? How does that work?
Okay, very good question. This is an extreme case when, for example, the men have gone to jihad. Okay, when men have gone to jihad, there's no more men left in the city in order to perform and give ghusl to the men that have passed away. In a case like that, then the woman can give ghusl to the deceased. Now, she can attain help. Now, inshallah, we'll show the practical element of that as to how the aura of the man should always be covered. And similarly, because the question is a very vast question in the sense that there's so many other situations that can be mentioned when it comes to males and females. So I'll give you one other example. If a woman was to pass away, but she was a very large lady, for example. Okay, she was a very heavy woman, for example. Okay, in a situation like that, and women themselves won't be able to lift her or raise her from one platform to the other. Even in a situation like that, as long as her aura is covered, then the next of kin, in terms of her son, nephews, those people, her maharim, they can come and they can help raise her from one platform to the other. But coming back to your question, in a situation, an extreme situation where there is no other man, and the woman wants to give ghusl, and she's the only mahram for him, and she needs help and assistance, then she can. Okay? Then she can take the assistance of other women, providing that the cover is fully covered, the mahram is fully covered when giving ghusl. We'll speak about giving ghusl to a deceased loved one, in particular with regards to covering of the aura. So we'll speak about that. And the final point is, a husband cannot touch or give ghusl to his late wife, but everything else is permissible in the sense of raising the bier, in terms of walking with the bier, in terms of lowering her into the grave. All of these things are permissible. Coming to the practical element of it, these are some of the things that are very, very important to keep in mind when giving ghusl. Previously, when masajid weren't equipped to give ghusl to the deceased, when masajid didn't have all the facilities, then these checklists were very, very important. So I'm not going to go through all of these things, but I will read some of them and mention some of the wisdoms that are required. In the past, you'd find people used to have bags, small bags that were kept at home. In that bag were all of these things, well, most of these things, because if I say all, you can say that, well, how did they carry the water? But people used to have handbags. In their handbags, they used to have their kafan sheets, they used to have everything else that was required. So we created a list for people to still have. Some people are still so diligent that they come to the masjid, but they don't use the things that are at the masjid. So they bring their own things to the masjid in order to ensure that the ghusl is given with their own things. Okay, so people do that. From amongst the first things that we've mentioned is lukewarm water. Okay? Remember, we didn't say cold water, we didn't say hot water. We've said lukewarm water. That's exactly what I've said previously, and that is that the deceased feels even the warmth and the coldness of the water. Therefore, the water should be run or passed over someone's hand before the deceased is washed. One of the things I was very pleased to see, mashallah, that was brought up today, and that was these traditional things. Okay, these traditional buckets and these cups or mugs or goblets, whatever you like to call them, because this is the traditional way of giving ghusl to the mayyit, and this is the best way. Okay, when we give the practical element, I will show it, that the level of taqwa that people had was such that they would get the water and place it over their hand, and they would place the hand over the deceased, such that they're not pouring water directly over the deceased individual. Okay? Because by throwing water on the deceased, it will affect and cause pain for the deceased individual. I've seen today people use hose pipes as well. Okay? Now you can imagine what kind of experience that the mayyit will be having using hose pipes, okay? Pressure pipes and so forth. So this is why this is beautiful to see, to stick to the traditional method. Pour water over your hand, you can see the temperature of it, and the water falls upon the deceased individual. Then the platform, make sure that the platform is washed first, then bucket, 2 jugs that we mentioned, nail polish removal. Okay, that's something which is very, very important to keep in mind. Simply because by having nail polish, it doesn't fulfill the requirement of a ghusl. Okay? Now, again, in today's day and age, it's very, very difficult to say to sisters, please don't wear nail polish. You don't know when the time of death may come. You may die. If you die, you'll have nail polish on your hands. If you have nail polish, your ghusl, there will be issues with it. Okay? So it's very, very important that we have a nail polish remover with us. However, one of the courses that I did, someone from the sister side did educate me and said that when a person has passed away, the nail polish remover doesn't work. Now, I haven't been able to test that. They said that the reason why the nail polisher works is through the circulation of blood beneath it. Okay? So, I won't be able to answer that question with regards to that. But this is why it's very, very important that we follow the Sharia from the onset as opposed to follow the Sharia on the day. This is why it's important to educate each other. It's important to sit together, learn, study. Okay? Today, it's very common for people, for women, and in some cases brothers, to have long nails. But they don't understand what the Prophet ﷺ said about nails, that beneath every long nail is a shaitan sitting there. Okay? Today's science is telling us with regards to the impact of having long nails and what goes beneath long nails. When in reality, long nails was part of a predator animal in order for them to be able to prey. So we've gone, literally, when we move away from the Sharia, we're moving away from sanity, and we become insane without questioning what we're doing and why we're doing it. So please, always have that taqwa, always be ready, and it comes back down to the hairstyle of women. Always be ready, because death can come at any time. Then in addition to that pair of scissors, we have some scissors that are here. What's important to keep in mind is that the deceased individual, if they come from the hospital, they will have a bag. Okay, the bag will be opened up. Once the bag will have a zip, the bag will be opened up, and then they will be wearing a specific type of gown. Now that gown is often very close to the body, to the physical skin. Therefore, it's very, very important that we become very tactful in how we cut that white colored gown from the deceased individual. The way to do it is from the neck all the way to the arm, and then from underneath the arm and all the way below. That way you can just roll it off. And the way that we roll it off, I'll explain it when we give the ghusl, is that you roll it to the side and you place it under the deceased, and then when you tilt the deceased to one side, then you can roll it out from the other side. Okay? So always keep your hand under the sharp edge when you're cutting, so that you're not stabbing the deceased individual. Then 2 pairs of gloves or mittens, or you can have tissue like this that you can make into mittens. This is how the istinja and the istibrar is done, and that is the cleaning of the front and the back passage. Then we have camphor. This usually can come in liquid form, or it can come in something of this nature, which is powdered. And this is the reason why we have this very important tool in order to break the camphor down and then place it in water, dissolve it in water, such that the final wash of the deceased is one that is camphor water. And this is in line with the teachings of the Prophet ﷺ, who would use the sidr leaf and dissolve it in water, and then they would use it inside water in order to give the final wash, and the purpose of it is for the preservation of the body. Then we have luban, other incense sticks, and a lighter. These things are very, very important, especially when the body can come in two different forms. It could either come directly from a house, and the body could be fresh. So a person passes away in the morning, the cause of death is known, and the coroner is happy. Nowadays the system has changed, by the way. You don't go directly to the coroner. There's another set of doctors who can actually give the death certificate. So inshallah, brother Brother Ramzan, mashallah, who will be able to explain the legal side of what happens, inshallah. So hopefully we'll give him some time to explain what the legal requirements are. So you could have death at home, and the cause of death is known, and the cause of death is unknown. You could have a death at hospital, and the cause of death is known, and the cause of death is unknown. Okay? And then you have another type of death, and that is a accident, or death by accident, and they are the ones that take a long time for the coroner to clear before the deceased is actually, the final rites and the funeral and the burial is taking place, because they need to determine what the cause of death is. Okay? So again, there are legal processes. Things have recently changed from a law perspective. Inshallah, Brother Ramzan will inform us. The reason why I mention that is because depending on the type of body that comes, then you will find that sometimes the rectum will still have feces inside it, and therefore when warm water is placed over the deceased, that feces, the stool, excretion, that will be exited from the body, and it can generate a very bad odor. Therefore, it is mustahab. I'm not saying it's fard, wajib or sunnah, it's mustahab to actually light plenty of bahul, such that if it does come, then it doesn't overrun the smell and the fragrance and the odor of the deceased individual. So again, it's about covering the sanctity of the deceased individual. Then we have mothballs that are often used. They were used plentiful in the past, where people used to go and perform their hajj or their umrah. They used to bring those they used to bring their ihram sheets. They used to place a few mothballs inside it, and then they used to leave it wrapped in a plastic container or a bag. And then when the person would pass away, maybe 5, 10, 15 years later, they would take the coffin sheets out, and those coffin sheets would be heavily stained. Okay. Now, I will speak about the coffin sheets in themselves, how the Prophet ﷺ said that when the deceased are raised from their graves, they will do tafakhur over the quality of their coffin. So the Prophet ﷺ recommended that you give your deceased a good coffin. Okay? But making sure that that coffin is something of a cotton material and something that is aired on a regular basis, especially if it has some sentimental value to it. 2 dark sheets, very, very important. They are to protect and maintain the sanctity of the deceased, such that the aura of the deceased individual is covered at all times. Then 2 towels, ideally used. The reason why we say used ones is because they have more of an ability to absorb the water from the deceased individual. Okay, so people often bring brand new towels, but when they wipe the deceased individual, then you'll find that less water is actually absorbed by the new towel. Also, it's very important to mention, even at this stage, and that is that you're not washing down the deceased individual, rather it is a spiritual wash. Please keep that in mind. Okay? So you're not rubbing, you're not scrubbing the deceased individual, rather you're washing the deceased individual. And the Shar'an definition of washing is to ensure that at least 2 drops of water pass over the area before it's classified as washed. Then inshallah what we've mentioned is the halal soap. We should be using that anyways. Cotton balls and earbuds, plasters, super glue. Again, for those bodies that come with injuries, We've had bodies that have come from operation theatres that are cut, that are open, wounds that the body has inflicted, and then sometimes we will have to apply bandages for that. Generally, if there is a body that is, if blood is coming from a body, what we say is that we allow the blood to flow. Okay? We allow the blood to flow, because if you stop it, then you will find a different exit to come. And this is one of the reasons why you have bodies that may have blood coming out from the ears or from the nose or from the eyes. Okay, it's because people are stopping the blood. If blood is coming, allow it to flow. Okay, so we need to keep that in mind. Then obviously waste bin bags are very, very important, because this also protects the sanctity of the deceased individual, and I'll explain why when we get to that. This is what we will need, or this is one of the first steps of the practical elements of giving ghusl. I'll stop in a few minutes, inshallah, then we can go for our prayer. We need one designated amir for everything. One designated amir for everything. When we're traveling, we need one designated amir. The job of the amir is to ensure that all the criteria is fulfilled. Yes, you could have 4 to 5 helpers, but one person is fully responsible to ensure that the entire ghusl is complete. So amongst yourselves, make sure you make that decision as to who that one individual is. Then in addition to that, for each ghusl, there should be 4 to 5 helpers, unless there is a requirement for more. Okay, 4 to 5 people that are helping. I will mention their places and their positions as to where they should be placed and where they should be positioned. Then we have luban and incest that should be burnt before the body is actually taken out of the bag or before it is opened. It's very, very important that we do that, simply because we don't know what state the body is going to be in. Also, it's important to read the report of the deceased individual and then take further precautions as and when required. Okay? So one of the things that you see here is face masks. Okay? Face masks are very, very important, because there are airborne illnesses that can be transmitted. Okay? I remember giving and helping in a ghusl once where the deceased individual died from hepatitis. Now, the people didn't know that this was the cause of death. Therefore, when the mayyit came to the mortuary, no one knew that the cause of death was hepatitis. And as soon as they find out and realize that this is an airborne illness, then people started to look for masks. So we need to be very, very careful before handling the deceased individual, that we read a report as to who it is. There are certain types of bodies that will come that a faint-hearted individual will not be able to help, and that's perfectly normal. This is why one of the conditions of a person to witness the washing of the deceased is only a student of knowledge or a person who wants to help and get involved. No other person should be present except the 5 or 6 people that we have mentioned. The only exception is the individual who is learning this process of giving ghusl. And this is why we need more people coming in, more people witnessing. Some people have never seen a deceased individual in their life. And I'll mention the importance of this, inshallah ta'ala, after the break also, because if you never experienced the death in your family, you will get calls from the funeral director, for example, and they will ask you questions such as, what type of grave do you want? Okay. People won't know what types of graves there are out there. Do you want an earthly grave? Do you want a casket grave? A vault grave? What type of grave do you want? And people will say, well, we prefer an earthly grave. We're Muslims, we should be having an earthly grave. Only for them to realize, well, the earthly grave may not be Sharia compliant, because all it is a pit. And rather, the vault grave is more Sharia compatible. So these are things we need to discuss, we need to have an understanding of. So when we do get that call, we know what the options are and which one we should be taking. Then inshallah, wash the stand first. Place the body on the stand. The du'as that I've already mentioned, Allahumma gfir lahu. Preferably the right shoulder should be towards the Qibla. This casket is a prime example of how the deceased should be laid. The Qibla is in this direction, the right shoulder is in this direction, and the feet are going the opposite, not per se opposite, but the opposite of it is the left side, the right side is facing the direction of the Qibla. And then similarly with the face, that should be turned towards the direction of the Kaaba. Then we ensure that the cover the aura and remove all things such as dentures, jewelry, clothes, tags, etc. And if there is nail polish and things of that nature, then we remove them. Inshallah, we'll just stop at this slide. I'll just do a bit of a recap of this, and then we'll continue, inshallah, straight after Salah, inshallah. Remove all rings, dentures, jewelry, clothes, and tags. It's important to keep in mind that a lot of these things should be done as soon as the person passes away, especially when it comes to things like rings, dentures, things of that nature, earrings. They should be taken off straight away, simply because if the body is left, then it will be very difficult to remove some of these things. So this is where, as soon as a person passes away, there are a number of things that should be done straight away to the deceased individual. And from amongst those is to straighten the limbs of the deceased individual, to ensure that the mouth is closed, to ensure that the eyes are closed, and to ensure that the feet or the toes are tied together. So these are the initial things that we should do. At the same time, it is better that the person is facing the right side. So the person, as soon as he passes away, that his face is facing towards the right side. This is also a recommendation for an individual who has passed away. Keep in mind that if a person passes away and there is no one to do these things, then this cannot be done later. Okay, this cannot be done later. This has to be done as soon as the person passes away. So this is the practical element of giving the ghusl. I think it will be, yes, bismillah.
I know this we shouldn't be Islamic, we should do this, but it happens. What happens if someone's got a tattoo or false eyelashes, something like that?
Okay, very good question. There are certain things that are required to remove. Those that can be removed without causing pain to the deceased individual should be removed. And those that can't be removed, that are, for example, surgically implanted, those things shouldn't be removed. And we should really be careful. And this is why there are so many examples that I can personally give of you. I was working in a different city altogether, and the masjid phone rang. I remember very clearly, I picking the phone up. It was a masjid number. I picked the phone up, and I heard the screams of a mother crying behind, and the sister, who was also crying, she said, "Can I speak to the imam?" I asked, "Can I help?" She said, "Yes." She said, "A week ago, we buried our brother, and he keeps coming into my dream asking me to remove his gold teeth that he had." Okay. So the mother and the sister of the deceased individual were getting these dreams, and the young lad had a gold tooth cosmetically put in. Okay, so it wasn't a requirement or anything of that nature, but cosmetically he had a gold teeth because he looked good. Now he was coming into the dreams of his mother and his sister asking for it to be removed as it was causing him great pain. Okay. Now, the Shar'an reason is not that he is now allowed or it is to be removed, no, but rather for the deceased family to give sadaqah on his behalf, anticipating Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive that individual. So this is why we need to really be careful when we're doing certain things. Now, obviously things like tattoos, for example, those are impermissible from the onset. If a person was to do that and then die in that state with tattoos, then they cannot be removed at that stage. Okay? Whereas false eyelashes, for example, if they can be removed by placing a lot of water on, then they should be, but it will cause a lot of pain to the deceased individual. So do keep that in mind, inshallah. We're going to move on. Obviously, time constraints, we're going to move on. This is... So as soon as the deceased individual arrives at the... Are we okay to... Can you project this on there or... Sorry?
The lights.
Yeah, can we get the lights on as well, please? Okay, as soon as... So this mannequin that we have is quite good because his head moves. So the head obviously is facing the direction of the Qibla. It's facing the direction of the Qibla, which is this direction. So this is the way that we should actually have the deceased as he arrives. I'll just warn you that his arm's going to fall off before it actually does fall off. Okay. So when a male arrives, straight away we need to ensure that the knees are here and the belly button is here. This area is covered. Okay. When it comes to a female, we need to ensure that her aura is completely covered. That includes from her ankles all the way up to her throat. This is the most important thing to keep in mind. If you can imagine yourselves having a ghusl in your home and someone peeping inside or looking inside, it could be even a relative or a family member, you wouldn't be happy. And this is exactly how the deceased feels. Okay? So much so that it is mentioned in the books that the soul of the deceased sees the person who is washing him. Okay? This is the level and the connection that the soul still has with the living, that it can still see those that are present at the time of giving ghusl. So if we say that this is for a male, then we ensure that up to his belly button and up to his knees it's covered. Now, like I mentioned, the first thing we do is we cut off from the neck all the way down. We cut off on the sides, we cut off all the way down, and then two people on that side, third person on the head, fourth person on this side, fifth person on this side. So we'll give you a diagram of that as well. Person one, his job is to ensure that the head moves with the rest of the body. It's very, very important that one person is allocated that particular role. You will probably see this thing as well. Sometimes this will be useful, but sometimes it may not be useful. And the reason is simply because of the deceased individual. Sometimes his or her head may be suspended, and sometimes it may be flat. If it's suspended, just to place this underneath here will support and rest the deceased person. Okay? We place this. The eyes are closed, the mouth is closed, the feet are joined together. This is the time to undo all of that. It's also important to check the ankles on both sides, to check the hands and the wrists, because if the body has come from hospital, then most likely they will have some sort of tags, or one of the cannulas. Okay, definitely, yeah. Cannulas, they will have them here, so check that, and they can be removed. Most likely, depending on how the person has died. If the person has died where they suffered a shock or a trauma, then there will be blood coming out. Okay, if they have died from a shock or an accident, then there will be blood coming. Then allow that to flow. Continue your ghusl as usual. Even if it continues to flow throughout, allow it to flow. Complete your ghusl, and then see how much of the blood is flowing. Sometimes you may have to wait, and sometimes it may stop. Okay? And sometimes you may be able to put a small plaster on that and then continue with it as well. Okay? But everybody that comes will come with its own trials, own difficulties, own issues. You just have to understand which one is that you're going to be having to face. Okay? Generally, we can mention different principles, but again, it depends on the state that it comes, and you have to be ready for it. Okay? You have to be ready for it. Okay? There are times where you may have a body. We've had instances where the person, it was the winter months, he was sat in front of his fire, warming himself up, and the soul left his body. Not literally. That wasn't planned, by the way. That's right. So it all depends. That particular body was such that it was left unattended for a few days with the gas still on. Okay? When it came to us, as soon as you touch it, the skin was falling off. In a situation like that, you cannot give ghusl, rather you have to then perform tayammum on the mayyit. Okay, you have to perform tayammum. Okay? And you will find other situations as well. Okay?
If there is a place of water, or as you said, the body was bleeding, you allow it to flow, would you try and put a bandage on and then do the ghusl, or just finish the ghusl and then bandage and then stop the flow? Not stop the flow, but just to get something to absorb the flow, whatever the fluid may be.
Yeah, good question. With regards to an individual who came, for example, it could be an invasive autopsy. We as Muslims need to try and avoid invasive autopsy as much as we possibly can. There is another option of MRI scan. Okay, again, find out from Ramzan Bhai or someone else or your local coroner as to what the situation with regards to that is. The Jewish community has been using the MRI scan since the late 80s. Okay, so if any of their body requires determining of cause of death, they have that option of actually having an MRI scan in order to avoid invasive autopsy. Okay, but coming to your question, if the body or if some part of the body is bleeding, we allow it to bleed and continue with the ghusl. Okay, only after we have completed the ghusl do we put a plaster on if the blood isn't as much. Okay, so it all depends on how much blood comes. Like I said, sometimes you may be waiting an hour or two and there's still blood coming. Okay, so in a situation like that, we put a small plaster on, we put a bandage depending on the size of the injury, and we continue with it. Okay, generally, if it's an invasive autopsy, then it is from the throat to the belly button that is opened. Okay, it's cut through here, and it's quite graphical. I've seen many done myself because of my background. But if people were to understand what actually takes place, then they would be horrified as to what goes on. Okay? The sanctity of a person is not left after invasive autopsy. Yes?
Is organ donation allowed in Islam?
Okay. Yeah, a good question. In organ transplants, it's not a question that I can give a yes or no answer to, but the only thing that I would say that if you think that your body and your organs belong to you, then it's your choice. But from the Quran, it says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has bought the believers from themselves. Okay, therefore, there is a group of scholars that have said that it's not permissible. Okay, but you will find those scholars that say that it is permissible. Okay, one of my teachers from Sham, Dr. Sheikh Samir al-Nas, Hafizahullah, he said that it is not permissible to give organs. Okay, not permissible to give organs.
In a case where someone's mother dies, the ladies present all the time don't know anything about how to deal with the body. Can the son do that procedure, as in putting the face to the cover, putting on knees straight, etc., and so on?
Of course. When a person dies, any member of the relative for the deceased mother can do that. There's no prohibition on that for the son. Sorry?
We couldn't hear the question.
Oh, sorry. The question was that as soon as someone's mother passes away and the females don't know how to do the final rites in terms of as soon as a person has passed away, so closing of the eyes, turning the face towards the Qibla, closing the feet together, making sure the hands and the fingers are all straight. A son can do that. Son, grandson, nephew, any maharim, they can do that. Okay, moving on, inshallah ta'ala. As soon as we're ready to give ghusl to the mayyit, we're in the mortuary. The first thing that we do is we ensure that the area that the deceased will be laid on and washed on is washed. We ensure that the incense is all around so that if there's anything that comes out from the back passage, then it doesn't give us a stench. Then what we do is we press the stomach. Okay, we press the stomach. In the past, they used to have something of a weight that used to place upon the stomach. This would create enough pressure for anything to come from the back passage or the front passage. Okay? Nowadays, because one of the things that happens is as soon as the soul leaves the body, due to the working of the body, there is gas that is created within the stomach. Okay? And this is what you will see is that the stomach inflates first. Okay? Similarly, this happens with animals as well. And if you read the books of fiqh, for example, Islamic law, you'd find that when animals fall into a well and die, one of the first questions they ask is, was the stomach opened or was it still intact? Okay, and then it takes a different ruling. Okay, so that's with regards to animals falling in a well. The point being is that the stomach opens up, then press it, compress it, bring it down. As soon as it's done, then we follow the next part. And that is to ensure that the aura of the deceased individual is fully covered. We'll do one person. Unless someone wants to volunteer and lie down here. I guess not.
I can lie down if you like. I'll get no objection.
Is the table strong enough?
We'll stick to this, inshallah.
You want me now? Come back.
No, Jazakallah. Jazakallah. Yeah, inshallah. We'll do this, inshallah. So we placed a thick cloth. We've washed pressed the stomach. Then the first thing that we do is istinja and istibrar. Istinja is the front passage and istibrar is the back passage. So usually there's two ways of doing it. One way is to use mittens. Okay? The purpose of mittens is such that there's no sensation in the hand. Okay? You don't feel any sensation in the hand. Hence you use mittens. If you don't have mittens, then make sure you wear gloves. Okay? Once you wear gloves, then you create a ball like this. Once you've created the ball, and this is where the helpers help. Okay? Their job is to assist. So they will hold the sheet up like this. Our job will be very, very simple. And this is something that requires a bit of tact, but it's very important that we get it done. And the way that we will do it is without looking. And this is where new people always have an issue, because they want to see where the water is poured. Okay, we don't look where the water is poured. Rather, we take both hands. One person pours and the other one washes. Okay, this is how we do it. Okay, so we don't look underneath. So all of this is covered. Okay, we place our hand underneath. We come over the deceased individual. We place our hand beneath. We're not looking underneath. Everyone is close so that they can't see underneath. We pour water and we clean. This we do 3 times of the front passage. Then when it comes to the back passage, this is where the helpers, they will slightly raise the deceased individual. Okay? As they raise the deceased individual, then the person who is washing, he makes sure that his left hand, it goes underneath, and he's pouring water over with the right hand. And he gets to the back passage. Okay? The person holding the black bag should be close by, so as soon as something comes out, it goes straight into the black bag. We're not looking as to what's come out, how much you've cleaned, what's the quantity. We're not looking at nothing like that. This happens 3 times. We use 6 mugs of warm, lukewarm water. Pour as much as you possibly can. Sometimes it's important that the people who are holding the legs, they open the legs up in order to ensure that the water passes through all of the area. It's very, very important that water is passed through that area on both sides. This is why it's very, very important that the helpers are there, they're holding the sheet. Okay? But they're holding it not like this, but they're holding it like this. So they're over it and no one is looking underneath it. Then we move on. They're using cotton, wipe the hands, the mouth, and the teeth, and the gums. These are, as you can recognize, these are your fard elements of giving ghusl. Okay, the fard elements of giving ghusl. So here we wash the arm. Okay, so we wash. So we don't have to wash the hands, but we wash the arms, or we place cotton using cotton balls. We wash the mouth 3 times using 3 of these. And then we take another 3 to ensure that the nose is washed. Okay? Now if the mouth is closed, we don't open it to wash. We don't pour water into the mouth either. Okay? So even if you can get wet cotton balls to wipe over the mouth or what is visible or what can be seen, then that is sufficient. and we use the same thing, or cotton buds, in order to ensure that inside of the nose is also washed. Okay? So that is what we do. So no washing of the hands, but mouth, nose of the deceased, and then using wet cotton, wipe the hands, the mouth, the teeth and gums, and the nose. Okay? So that's what we do. Once that is done, then we take cotton balls, or we take this tissue, we make it into balls, we place it into the mouth if the mouth is open. Okay, if the mouth is open, we place it inside the mouth, and we place it over the eyes and the ears, simply so that these are the outlets. We don't want water to be pouring inside. Okay, we don't want water to be pouring inside. Okay, and as soon as the ghusl is done, then that's something we take out and throw away. Perform the fard of wudu, except for the minor child, and that is washing of the face. So we pour water over the face, placing the hand over and then placing the water over our hand, and then the water comes over the face. Okay? There is no rubbing, no scratching, none of that thing that is needed. Once the face is washed, then we wash the arms. Okay? The arms we wash all the way up to the tips of the finger to the elbows, and including above the forearm here. Okay? Then we do on the right side, and then the left side. If at this stage we've done the arms, the face, the arms, the wiping of the head, then we wash both feet up to and including the ankles. Okay, now that is done. For the sisters now, obviously you need to unplaiten of the plaits or whatever it is. We need to untie it, loosen the hair, place water over it, make a split in the middle, and this is where half the hair comes from here all the way back and placed on the chest. Okay, so it's all the way down here, back here, and around over the shoulders and over the chest. This is what we do with the hair of the deceased female. Okay. Now that we're ready, we move on to the next part, and that is tilting the body to the left. Okay. So the way that the tilting is done, 6 people are required. 2 people on this side, 2 people on this side, 1 person on the head, 1 person on the foot. Okay? It's very, very important that wherever the body goes, that the person holding the feet goes with it. Okay, so he has to go with it, whichever way the person is tilted. Similarly, the head. As the body is tilted, 1 person is required to ensure that the head tilts with the body. Okay? If it's being tilted this way, then the person standing on this side needs to hold the deceased individual from 1 hand under the shoulder and the other one just below the arm. Okay, 1 person. The second person needs to hold beneath the shin and beneath the back part here as well. Once we move the deceased like this, then the person who is washing ensures that water reaches underneath. Okay, makes sure that the water reaches underneath. Okay, so just to give you an example, that the person is going to be like this now. Okay? As soon as the person is like this, making sure that all this area is washed. Okay, all of this is washed. Then we put the person down, and then those 2 people on that side will do the same thing and tilt the deceased individual this way, and the person who is responsible for the washing comes and washes on this side. Okay? So first we tilt to the left and wash the right side, then we'll tilt to the right and wash the left side. Once we've done that, then we ensure that the entire body is washed, making sure that no strand of hair is left that isn't washed. Okay? That is the amount of washing that we need to do. So the first washing will be done with water only. Okay, just lukewarm water. The second wash that will be required is to make sure that we lather in soap or shampoo or anything of that nature that is inside the bucket with the water. Generally people use soap and then they lather the soap inside the water, and then they use that soapy water. The soapy water, we do exactly the same thing. Move the body to the right, and then to the left, and then all over the body, including the center. And then the final wash that we do is the wash with the water and camphor. Okay, the water and the camphor. Okay. Once that is done, then we replace the black sheet with a new black sheet, because now this one is going to be very soiled, it's going to be wet. Okay, it may have impurities on it. Then we replace it with a different sheet. Even if at this stage you have completed all the washing, you see impurities. If you see impurities, just wash them away. You don't have to repeat the ghusl. You don't have to repeat the ghusl. So you wash the deceased individual. Any questions on that washing?
Hi, Sheikh.
Sorry?
I have a question.
Yeah.
When we're changing the second black cloth, how do we make sure that we're not doing anything?
Okay, very good question. Most of all of this is all done tactfully. Okay, most of all of this is done tactfully. Okay, so the way that we will do it is like this. Okay, so imagine this is a black sheet. Okay, two people are, there you go. Now your black sheet is up. Okay, and the deceased is still covered. Okay, that's how you do it. Okay, yes, another question?
Are we washing the hair on the head or no?
Yes, we're making sure that the roots of every hair is washed. The root of every hair is washed. So water is gone through the hair. Okay, does that answer your question?
Sorry, got a question.
Yeah.
I'm assuming when you said going to lift, you still cover the
Of course, the aura is always covered. Okay, the aura is always covered. Okay, and sometimes you can do that and then pull this out.
Yeah.
Okay, you can do it like this as well. Okay, so the aura is still covered. The aura is covered throughout the entire process. Okay. Just as you would like your privacy to be concealed in the private area of your own room, that is exactly what's going to take place in a ghusl area with your loved one. Okay? Inshallah ta'ala. What I'd like to do now is, if you can please get divided into groups of 5 or 6, groups of 6. Inshallah, there are some tables that we have put out at your own risk. If one person can lie on top of it, and if the others, one can be the person at the head, one can be a person at the feet, and 4 people around. Let's try and practically do it. We have some experienced people, mashallah. Ramzan Bhai is here somewhere, Atib is here, and then let's try and go through some of this so that we can do it in a practical way, inshallah.
Imagine there is a chadar. Just spread into more groups, please.
Then after that, this thing you're going to do, cover his liver, and like Imam Sahib explained, एकदम से जैसे भी हर किसी ने डिफरेंट, कोई ने पैंट्स पहनी होगी, कोई ऐसे पहनी होगी, आपको देखना पड़ेगा what kind of clothes he's wearing and which is the easiest way we can take his clothes off without any discomfort. Then once you wash that, then you wudu करना। ये जो मुंह का हिस्सा है, मुंह और दांतों का हिस्सा, you don't try to go to it. You got cotton buds, wet करके इनके दांतों के ऊपर, मसूड़ों के ऊपर और in the lips. 3 दफ़ा करते हैं, and then जैसे वुज़ू करते हैं ऐसे first mouth, then nose, whole face का face भी है ना, be careful. ये है ना, very careful, make sure no one goes in mouth. अक्सर मुंह खुला होता है, you have to be careful that no one goes in the mouth. Yeah, cover करने और आराम से कि हल्का हल्का करके पानी मुंह में न जाए, या उसमें what you can do is उसमें कॉटन बचता है मुंह में और नाक पे कॉटन बंद आते हैं, इसका वजू हो जाए देन मोटी मोटी जैसे हम गुसल करते हैं जैसे वजू में करते हैं ये कैसा फर्स्ट राइट साइड
तो हम पहले इतना करते हैं फिर
ये डिफरेंट होगा ये जैसे वजू में तो आप मेरे हाथ धोएंगे
But the hardest is to put him out straight. This is the first thing. सबसे पहले पानी को आते हैं.
So maybe you move a bit more down.
Permissible है दोनों.
Actually, you might do that. Alright, you're not supposed to lift your legs. So.
And then go right and
After we do that, it's the final wash, which we use the comfort, something, that perfumes and then you're going to do that. Then you dry. Does everyone remember how we said we're going to dry? With the sheet, but not like this. And after that is the shroud. We'll have it covered today. So maybe you can just take it in turns. Okay. Just open it up. We'll do this. You have to lift the legs. Maybe says make it higher than this. Those two of you, one will be pouring and the other one. And then each time you take it off, you see how it is. And over the back side, one person can lift, one person can lift, you lift this leg. Sometimes the one is really heavy, so you two people. Okay? And then one person gets that pull, and then you can come as well. You can do that way. Okay? Now you maybe you can swap. Okay? And you can have a go with the help of the turtles. You see how easy it is.
So at the beginning we did the front thigh, then what's the next thing after that?
The box is in the
Before the wudu, you put something close to
When did you do that?
No, before doing the wudu.
So we just did that.
So you're not looking, you just estimate under the private boundaries, and you think while you're feeling that, and you do that three times. First the front, then the back.
I need to go. I spoke with him.
When you come to the back,
Just tell him what we want and give me some and I know يعني part of this يعني أول كنت الحمد لله حيسي بزغل.
you know, look at what's come out. Every time you have to change it. Every time you have to change it. Once you've done the stanza, then you're coming to the first the right hand side. You can slightly gently decide what you want. So whatever. First time. First you're going to wash the body 3 times. You've done the stanza, now you're giving him a bath. You're washing him. So first the right hand side, then the left hand side. Now gently you massage it. Everybody does it in a different way. The way we do it is not soapy water. It's just plain water. The first two are just plain. Okay? So you already soak the body down. Now you want to take the soap. So you're just pouring it, making sure that water goes to every part of the body. इसके अगर बगल में आराम से then to get to the under the body, it tilts the body. Like this. Okay, you might need 3 people, depending on the size of the body. Yeah, because you have to be as gentle with the body as possible. कोई इनको तकलीफ जितनी कम तकलीफ दे सके टेस्ट करके साइड पे the shoulder say up right to there 3 times. The hand, the back, and then when you finish on this side, then again you do soak the body on this side. First then what you can see, what you want 3 times there, and then tilt the body on there, soak the body. Now, the third time
then you get I do have the details, but in the time that we have, just to know that MRI scan, the coroner will accept MRI scans for adults. They won't accept it for children. They will accept it for a natural death to determine the cause of it, but they won't accept it for an accident. Anyone who's had a hip replacement, knee replacement, any issues like that, or anyone that's had metal placed in their body, MRI scan doesn't work for that individual either. So there are certain conditions. It's very quick. You can go and get access to your MRI scanner from the local hospital, usually from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. You can have access to it. All you have to do is get a radiographer to come and complete the procedure through the MRI scanner. Then you can email a radiologist who can write the report and hand it to the coroner for the next day. Okay, that was one question. Another question was with regards to fridge, placing the body into the fridge. Obviously, from the perspective of Islam and from the perspective of Muslim, one thing that we should always do is hasten the deceased to the grave. And that is what the believer wants. The believer, as soon as his soul departs, he is screaming and shouting, "Take me to the graveyard, take me to the graveyard, take me to the graveyard." It's very sad in today's day and age, and I've experienced this personally with people, that they say, well, today's Wednesday, let's do Janazah Thursday, and let's bury the loved one on Friday. Then the first night will be Friday. Okay? This is wrong. This is wrong. From the Sharia perspective, as soon as a person dies, as Muslims, it's our responsibility as a community to ensure that our beloved, his paperwork is done straight away. Okay, and he's buried straight away at the first instance. We don't wait for having a big janazah. We don't wait for relatives coming from abroad. We don't wait for people traveling to us. No, because that's not what the deceased wants. What the deceased wants is to be buried immediately. And that's what the soul yearns. And that is the practice that we need to make sure. We need to look at the deceased first. Okay, not what's convenient for us. Okay? Not what is convenient for us. Okay, so that was another question. There was another question with regards to graves and the different types of graves. Again, there's a lot to cover. We have very limited time. We only have probably 20 minutes until Maghrib, so I want to cover the next part so that we're familiar with the Kafan side of things. The Kafan is very, very easy. Okay, there's only one slight point of contention with the sister's Kafan. But generally for the brothers it's very, very easy, it's very simple, it's very straightforward. Okay, we'll do some of those inshallah. So this is just the positioning of the deceased, like I mentioned. There's the okay, so there's the Kaaba. If the Kaaba direction is there, then make sure that the right side is facing, or if the Kaaba is towards this side, then make sure that the feet are facing in that direction. The laying, before I do that, here. This is the important part. This is the Kafan sheets for the male and also the Kafan sheets for the female. If you do the male one, because the male one is exactly the same as the female one with the addition of 2 things at the end. So both male and the female, they have what's known as lifaf, that is the outer sheet. Both male and female have the izar, which is the bottom sheet. And then both males and female have what's known as the kameez. And what's addition is the sina band and the orni. That is the only additional thing that we have. If, for example, you only have white cloth, but you don't know any types of measurement, then know that it's a very straightforward, simple method. And that is that the first thing is the lifaf. The lifaf is a foot above the head and a foot below the feet. So whatever the height of the individual is, add a foot above the head and add a foot beneath the feet. Okay? So if someone is 6 foot tall, then make sure you cut the lifaf, the outer garment, as 8 foot. Okay? That's number one. The second thing that you have to be careful about is the width of the cloth as well. Okay? Too often people only look at the length and they don't look at the width. Okay? And when you look at the width, don't just measure the waistline, because you have to get the arms inside as well. Okay? And what you don't want is the lifaf coming together and yet they don't meet in the center. Okay? So it's important that the width of the cloth is such that it covers the deceased individual. So that is your measurement with regards to the lifaf. Below that is your izar. Your izar, even though we say is a lower garment, but generally the size of the izar is from the head to the feet. Okay? From the head to the feet, that is your izar, for both males and for the females. When it comes to the kameez, there is only one slight difference between the male kameez and the female kameez. Okay? Now the kameez is the size from your shoulder to below your knee. From your shoulder to below your knee times 2. Okay? It is times 2. So shoulder to below the knee times 2, because you need it to go behind and you need to go over the head and then in front. The only difference between the male and the female kameez is the way that you cut it. Okay? The way that you cut it. Now, I will just show it with this piece of cloth here. If this was the kameez of a person, so as you can see it's quite long. First you divide it in half. Okay, you divide it in half. Previously people used to have one side longer than the other, but that's not necessary. Okay? Once you have it in half, then you need to place it like this. So one side is behind and one side is at the front. Okay? Now, where there's a difference between the male and the female kameez is how do you open the head. Okay, so how does it go over your head? Now for men, the best way to do it, and women, the best way to do it is to have it in half again, and this is the middle of your kameez. Now this is where the head is going to be coming out from this part here. For the men, you cut along the sides. You cut along the side over. That way the cut is here and the cut is here. Okay? And it's placed, when it's opened with the cut, then it comes down like this. For the woman, you do exactly the same thing. Fold it in half on both sides so you have equal distance. But for the female, you cut down. Okay, you're cutting down. So when the kameez is placed over the woman, then it's like this. So you place it like this, and her slit comes here. The men's slit is across the shoulder, the woman's slit is coming down. That is the only difference. Okay, that is the only difference. Okay, with regards to the kameez. Okay. Then after that, the other thing that we have here is the sina band. This doesn't apply to the brothers. So the sina band for the sisters is from the shoulder to the waist. In essence, it's called chest wrap. Okay, it's called chest wrap. Now, if we take this to be the chest wrap, this is what the chest wrap is. Okay, there are two ways of placing this upon the deceased woman. Okay, there are two ways in placing the chest wrap upon the woman. Number one, or the principle is, it depends how she's lived her life. Meaning, what is the culture of her community? Okay, what is the culture of her community? Now, Brother Munir here? Okay, mashallah. Okay, that's one Brother Munir. There was a Brother Munir from Syria as well. Okay. He may have left. No, anyway. There are two ways that a woman does her chadar in her life, or two cultures. One way is that she will wear all her clothes, she will have her abaya, she may have a top on, and then after that, just before she goes out, she'll get her chadar and she'll place it like this. Okay? This is one traditional way that a woman wears a chadar. Another way of a woman wearing chadar, and this is in some cultures as well, and that is what she will do is, beneath her abaya, she will put the chadar on, and then she will put the abaya on top of her chadar, and then she will put a jacket on top. Okay, that's another culture. Okay, so in the Arab world, for example, you won't see women wearing their chadars in public because they see it as an undergarment and not an overgarment. In the subcontinent, many women, they see the chadar as the outer garment, so they will just do this. Okay? Now this is exactly how a woman's kafan will be laid, depending on what is prevalent in that culture. Okay? Hope that answers the question for the sisters, inshallah. If there's any questions, please do ask. Okay? And the other part which is important, and that is the last thing there for the sisters which the brothers don't have, and that is the orni. Okay? Your orni is like your hijab. Okay? So it is placed over your head, and it's not tightened, it's not placed with any pins, or what else? I'm not too familiar. What? Safety pins. Yeah? You don't need no safety pins, you don't need anything like that. It is loosely placed over the head of the female. It could be a different type of cloth, it could be a very light cloth, it could be very small, and the way that it's placed is like this, and then this hair, it just comes down over the chest. Okay, this is the light way that the ornament is placed over and for a woman, which isn't placed for a male. Okay? So this is the way that these things are measured. The kafan is cut according to the height and the width of the deceased. Always check the width of the kafan and how it varies from roll to roll. So these things are important to keep in mind. The procedure for the kafan is very simple, and that is that the first thing that we do, for example, we have the casket here. Okay, so if we take this sheet off, so this is the men's kafan. If I can just have one or two people to help out, please. Inshallah, we're going to just pass this to these brothers, inshallah. They will make arrangements, inshallah, as to what goes where. Okay, what goes where. So these are the strips. Okay, inshallah, if you can put the strips. The reason for the strip is to ensure that the shroud doesn't open. Okay, is to ensure that the shroud doesn't open. Okay, one's placed at the chest side, one is placed at the waist side, and one is placed at the feet side. Okay, this is how it's placed. Do you have 2 or 3? Should be 3. Yes, there's a third one here. Okay, that's fine. So we have 3. Now that we've done the third one, we've done the 3, we just have to cut it. This is why it's important to check and to have your tools with you. Okay. Once that is done, we place the outer sheet first. So we don't need this one. We place the outer. So these brothers will have to measure the sheets. So if you want to just open them, see how long it is. And what you need is the longest sheet first. Okay, you need the longest sheet first. Place it over the casket. Okay.
Yeah.
Can I ask who cuts these? I'm not sure. Okay, that's good. Good answer. Okay, so the lifaf is gone first. This is for the male and for the female. Okay, once the lifaf is done, then for the sisters, they can put on the sina band now. Okay, they can put the sina band on now, or they can put it on later. Okay, they can put the sina band on now. This will be your izar, the lower garment. This will be less in length in comparison to the one that we already have. Okay. Okay, now the izhar is gone. Now that the izhar is gone, the next sheet that we have, if you just put it, that's it, yeah? That's it. As you can see, mashallah, this is cut well. The izhar is shorter in length than the lifaf. Okay? Once that is done, then you have the kameez. Remember what I mentioned with regards to the kameez? The best way to do it is to fold it in half first. Okay? Fold it in half first, then fold it again, get the middle. Once you got the middle, then you need to start cutting it either for the male across the top or for the female down. Okay, unfortunately this one has both. I don't know if this one was a gender-friendly one, but nevertheless, this one has both. It should be one or the other. The way that we place this in the casket, if you can just hold the bottom please. Okay, you bring it, if you just hold that side, and you place it where the head will go first. Okay, so where you will lower the head, that is where the kameez will go. Once both sides are gone, you need to roll up the top, like this. Okay, the top is now rolled up. The reason why it's rolled up is when the person is laid into the casket, then the bottom sheet, the back sheet is already laid down, the head goes through this hole here, and then we open up the front side of it, and as we are taking the black sheet off the deceased, then this white sheet covers the aura. Okay, that is how it's done. So if anyone wants to take a jump inside, then we can do that. Someone a bit light, a bit young? Anyone? Oh, the mashallah is over there. Mashallah, we have one young person. Okay, so we can take it off here. So we need you to sit around here so that your head is here. Okay? That's it. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. It's going to go down. It's okay. It's okay. Don't hold it from the sides. That's it. Don't hold it from the sides. That's it. Now, because everything has gone down, isn't it? And that's what we want. So he's going to put his head down. Okay? Oops. Okay. So as his head is down, remember that he's covered, because someone did ask the question earlier with regards to the aura of the person. So this sheet, his aura is still covered. The 6 people that were around, they raised the person.
Clothes over the top or?
No. Yeah. So basically his ghusl has now been done. We've taken him from the platform of the ghusl, and exactly how we mentioned, the people, one at the head, one at the feet, 2 on this side and 2 on that side, picked him up, placed him over and laid him into the casket. So he's still got his black sheet on from the ghusl. Now we place the kameez over his head, and as we've placed the kameez over his head, we take the black sheet off. Okay, the black sheet is off. Okay. Now, if it's a long kameez or a width, we just add it on. Okay. We just straighten it out. We place it on the side. Okay. Once that is done, then the izhar goes over first. Okay. So the left side first. Yeah. And then the right side. Hope it's not claustrophobic. Are you alright, yeah? Okay, fine. Okay, good. We'll just open that, and then the second one, we'll do exactly the same thing. Okay. And this side goes over as well. Okay, perfect. Okay. And then the strips that we have on the sides, then this is something that we can ensure that the coffin doesn't open up. Okay, so this is, and then we obviously put this inside the casket here, and put the extra additional just below the feet. If you don't do too much, yeah, just keep it really like that, sit here. You might want to get it for Maghrib. Okay, so if you just wrap that and just put it behind his feet. That's right, it's made for him. Perfect size. Okay, so this is it. So the addition is for the sister side. We've put 3 strips needed to be laid in the casket first, which we've done. Place the outer sheet in the casket, which is the lifaf. Place the izhar in the casket from the head, from the feet. Then lay the sinabad where the shoulders would lay. Then lay one end of the shirt in and the casket and folding the other end. And then the orni is put on last. Okay, that is for the sisters. So there's only 2 things that are different there. Okay, so if we go for the male shroud, this is in diagram form where you have the lifa. This first what goes in are the 3 strips, followed by the largest cloth, which is the lifaf. Then after the lifaf, we have the 3rd number, which is the izhar. And then we have the kameez that goes down. Remember the roll up of the kameez so that it can get rolled over the deceased as he's laid into the grave. The thing to keep in mind is for the male shirt, the cut, as you can see, is going across. That is across the shoulders. Okay, that is across the shoulders. Whereas if you look at the female side, exactly the same thing. There is the 3 strips going first. Second is the lifaf. 3rd is the izhar. Then we have the additional sina band that goes there, followed by the kameez. And as you can see, the kameez cutting is going diagonally, going across. Not across, but going down to show where that needs to be cut from. Okay, so that's the only difference. And then, like I mentioned, the left side first, then that is followed by the right side. That's closing. Oh, mashallah. Okay, he is resurrected again. Okay, so that is what we do with regards to the coffin sheets. We have 10 minutes, inshallah, before Maghrib. We have 1 or 2 packs. If anyone wants to take these, if you want to maybe do 1 or 2 groups, we have 1 or 2 sisters packs there as well. If you want to practice, then feel free to practice the shrouding element of it. Okay, very good question. With regards to the person who is given the ghusl themselves, then it is recommended that they perform a ghusl themselves and change of clothes because the impurities may have affected their own clothes. So this is a recommendation, a mustahab, that they have their own ghusl. In sometimes, for example, you've given ghusl to a loved one downstairs, and straight after the ghusl, the janazas and the zuhr salah, as long as there's no impurities on your clothes, then you are perfectly well to go and join the salah and also the janazah. Okay? But we have aprons and things like that, but it's always good to have external jubba that you bring, or maybe some other clothes that you wear and give the ghusl to the mayyit. Yeah?
Would we be able to find these slides online?
These come at a cost. The fact that here is enough, inshallah. We will provide supportive material. We will do this course again. Next time I won't be talking, inshallah. We'll just give you a coffin sheet and you get on with it. Okay, it's something that we can do. And most importantly, please sign up as volunteers for the funeral.
After the ghusl, we can do like it's sunnah, no?
That's right. The sunnah for the khushbu after the ghusl is done is the mawdu'at salah. So basically, your forehead and nose is 1 bone, your hands is 2, your knees are 3, and your feet are 4. These are places where you can put other. Okay, there are also other tabarrukat that were placed, for example, in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when the Sahaba were buried, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave from his own self. He sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave his own shroud for the deceased to be played inside the casket, inside the grave as well. But we are very limited in terms of time and what we can deliver and how much we can deliver. Usually this is about a 20-hour course that I've just done in an hour, kind of thing. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of information that we can give with regards to death and its preparation. So for now, inshallah, we'll just answer the questions. There are some ghusl packs that we have here, or kafan packs. If you want to shout someone on the table, then feel free to do it. But most importantly, please volunteer. And if you volunteer as a student, as soon as a ghusl comes, then you will be contacted. All you need to do is come, stand back and see. Okay, that's the most important thing. Just come and see. Many people may never have seen a dead person in their life. And no doubt it's a shock. Okay, it will be a shock, it's a shock, we experience it. But you only get desensitized by coming, by observing good practice, and then inshallah be ready for it. Last question, my question I remember, with regards to graves. Okay, because someone asked about graves. Brother Ramzan will be better to answer that question, but from my experience, there are two types of graves. One is an earthly grave and one is a vault grave. Now, if you have no idea what a grave is, someone gives you a call and says, would you like to bury your dad or granddad or an uncle in a vault grave or a earthly grave, you would probably choose the earthly grave because you think it's more Sharia compliant. When in reality, the vault grave is probably more in line with the Sharia than the vault grave, the earthly grave. We've been asked a few times whether we're going to share the slides. As it stands, we're not planning on sharing slides, but let's see, inshallah, we'll have a discussion and take it from there. What I don't really want to do is create a culture where we give our materials. We want to create a culture where people are making notes and writing and taking their own literature home. That's the kind of environment that we really want. Yes, inshallah, that's a very good question with regards to the graves themselves. The current choices that we have with regards to the graves are two. One which is an earthly grave and one which is classified as a vault grave. Now when we look at the graves from the time of the Prophet ﷺ, there were only two graves. One was known as the lahad and the other one was known as the shaq. These were the only two graves, or the two types of graves that existed in the time of the Prophet ﷺ. The two types of graves are such that one was like an L shape, and the person would be buried in the bottom part, which is the L side. And then there would be a mud and trees would be mixed together, and they would be placed in front of the deceased individual. So the grave going down would be filled up with soil, and the person would have a vacuum on the side here. Okay, if that makes sense? Yeah. So that would be one type of grave. The other type of grave is when both walls would be dug down, and then on ground level there would be another compartment underneath. And the deceased would be laid in the second compartment, and then leaves and branches would be placed over him, and then soil would be placed over. Now, both of those two types of graves are impossible to be built in today's day and age, simply because of the type of land that we have, simply because of the amount of waterlogged area that we have, simply because it requires an art, and unfortunately people can't deliver those anymore. So the options that we have now are only two types, one which is an earthly grave and the vault grave. Now the issue that we have with the earthly grave is that it's more of a pit than it is a grave. Because the way that it's done is a hole is dug, the casket, which is made of MDF, is placed, and when tons of soil, which is not even soil, it's more clay than actually soil, is placed on top of that MDF, you'll hear the MDF crack, and all the weight of the soil and the casket is placed upon the deceased individual, leaving absolutely no vacuum around the deceased individual in his grave. Okay. Now, the only other option that we have is the vault grave. Now, the vault grave is required, it's a necessity, simply because if you don't have a vault grave, then you will probably have a swimming pool under there. Okay, simply because of the nature of where we are and the amount of rainfall that we get, and generally because of the land that we have, it's all waterlogged. So this is why the vault grave, it acts as a barrier to the water coming in, but also it's an area where there is some sort of area that is around the deceased individual, and not weight and soil placed on top of him. So that's the one that we say is the more Sharia compliant.
Sorry, how the wall grade look like?
Sorry?
What makes the wall?
The wall grade is basically, it's basically concrete all the way around, and then they place concrete slabs over the top, and then they place a plastic membrane over the concrete, over the slabs, and then they place soil on top of that.
It's just what we do in back home.
That's right, yeah. That's how we do it in places in the subcontinent. Generally, they have breeze blocks or bricks that are used to build that cavity inside, and then they place the deceased at the bottom, and then they cover it up. The best way, the most ideal way, and I've mentioned this a few times, the most ideal way to bury a loved one is without the casket. That's the most Sharia compliant way, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran that we are from it and we will return to it. Okay, and that is soil. Yeah, we are from it and we will return to it, turab. Now with a casket, there's no concept of soil left inside it. Okay, so that's something that we need to really consider. From, again, it depends council to council. From where I am, they allow people to bury their loved ones without a casket. Okay, and that would be the most Sharia compliant. And even then, there should be soil placed at the bottom, and the soil should be raised like this. Okay, such that the deceased individual is laid in the grave whilst he's actually facing the right direction, which is the direction of the Kaaba. Okay, so he's facing the right anyway, but his body is placed upon a slant, on soil slant, such that he's also facing the direction of the Kaaba. Yeah. That would be the correct way of doing it.
How to quicken the burial with regards to the paperwork, which you mentioned earlier.
Okay, yeah, very good question with regards to the paperwork. Unfortunately, and sadly to say, most of the paperwork aspect is out of our hands. Sometimes a good funeral director can help. Okay, so the way that he can possibly help is he may know someone at the registrar or the coroner. That would help making sure that the process is quickened up. The other thing to make sure is that if a person is in hospital and the cause of death is known and the deceased or to be deceased individual is on palliative care, then it's very, very important that you understand who the consultant is, who is in charge of your loved one, and then to explain to them that as Muslims we want to hasten the funeral rites and the burial, and to ask them if they can sign a death certificate and have it ready, and as soon as a person passes away, he signed it and then he hands it over to you. Okay, so that would be the quickest way to get the paperwork done. Now, some of the things that you've got to keep in mind is often what we've had is the consultant who is in charge goes on holiday the day before the person has passed away, and there's no other doctor to sign the documents. That could take a long time, 4 days, 5 days a week, and so forth. Sometimes going to a surgery where there's a family surgery or a one doctor surgery is better than going to a surgery where there's 15 doctors sat there. I'm not sure if it's possible anymore here or not, but it is where I am anyway. And the reason is because if you have seen your GP in the last 15 days, before the person has passed away, then the GP can sign the death certificate. Okay? He can sign the death certificate. But if you haven't visited the doctor, or if it's been more than 15 days, then he won't be able to sign it off, and he will refer you to a group of doctors that actually sit and review their cases. If there's medical history for that deceased individual, they are more likely to sign off the death certificate. If they aren't, if they're not satisfied with the cause of death, then you refer to they will refer you to the coroner. He will listen to the case and then make a decision. Another one, sorry, can I just 1 second? One other thing to keep in mind is if the person dies at home, then for the love of God, don't move that deceased individual. Okay? Please do not move that deceased individual. I'll give you an example. There was a case in another city where a person died in the bathroom. Now the parents, it was a young lad, the parents thought, we can't have people think that our son died in the bathroom. Therefore, after he had died, they discovered him a few hours later, they picked him up, or they got family to pick him up, put him on the bed, okay? And they placed him on the bed, then they called 999 for the ambulance service. As soon as they came, they realized that he had an injury to the back of his head when he fell inside the bathroom. They said, if this person has an injury on the back of his head and is lying on a bed, surely a pillow can't do that. Straight away they called the police, they came, they cordoned it off, it became a crime scene, and weeks before the body was returned. So if a person was to die outside of the hospital, then don't start moving the deceased around the house. Okay, just leave the deceased wherever they are, however they are, treat it as a crime scene, call the ambulance, tell them to the best of your ability what's happened, and then it's their decision whether they say, look, this seems like a natural death, or they may think that it's someone may have an influence to it, and then they will do appropriately to that.
Yes, I think there has been some changes that came in from October this year.
That's right.
And I think that it automatically has changed. So I think if we can send everybody who has registered us some written contents on the changes that has happened, and on something on the administrative side of things that we have not managed to cover because of time, we'll send people something, inshallah.
MashaAllah. Tufail Bhai, who is our president, MashaAllah, Harrow Central Masjid, has kindly said that we will send out some information with regards to law change that's taking place from October onwards. They are trying to make it easier. The other thing to keep in mind is that when you do get the death certificate, you will have to take it to the registrar. Now, one thing to keep in mind is doctors are doctors, mashallah, but their handwriting is quite notorious, as many of you will agree. So what, I hope this don't come to here. The point being is that there has been experiences where the doctor has written and signed the death certificate, placed it in an envelope, given it to the family of the deceased, only for that form to be opened by the registrar and realize that either the date's missing, either he signed the wrong place, or his writing is not something that is clear. So that would mean that the registrar will have to get in contact with the doctor. If they can, all fine and well, but sometimes they might not be able to, which means that there's a further delay. Okay, so do keep that in mind as well. Okay, but do get involved in these processes so that you can understand what the process is, so that you can help loved ones who have passed away on their final journey.
I think now the death certificate is sent electronically to the registrar's office. You just have to go to the registrar's office to pick the death certificate up the following day.
Okay. Yeah. So there's a brothers mentioned that death certificate is sent to the registrar directly.
Electronically.
It's not the consultant. So the consultant can be on holiday. As long as any team from that department has seen the patient, the on-call doctor or whoever, they can do the death certificate.
Okay. Is that in hospital or?
In the hospital, yeah.
Okay.
And thirdly, if you get the bereavement office involved as soon as possible, they will do all the chasing up for you, so you have to do it.
Mashallah.
Quite relentless.
Okay, mashallah.
We cover all these in a leaflet, inshallah.
Okay, inshallah, that's good, mashallah. If we can, I need to update my software as well. Anything else on sister side?
Sorry, brother.
Yeah.
How can we avoid having the deceased have that like full invasive autopsy? Like, why would they have that done?
Okay, very good question with regards to autopsies. As Muslims, if we can avoid autopsies, then we should do as much as we can in order to avoid it. From the coroner's perspective, it is by law that they determine the cause of death of that individual. Now, if someone has a medical history, for example, it is up to the discretion of the coroner whether to have an autopsy or not. And it really is dependent upon him. Some coroners, they prefer, I was speaking to one of the coroners, he actually said that I prefer invasive autopsy simply because it helps us going forward to register the exact cause of death. Okay, so for future medicine or intervention with regards to illnesses and diagnosis of different illnesses or the prevalence of certain illnesses, they need this data. So they prefer to have or determine a particular cause of death for the deceased individual. And obviously when it's a crime matter, then it's a different story altogether. But as Muslims, we need to try and avoid it as much as we possibly can. One of the ways to avoid it is to go through a MRI scanner. Okay? Again, this isn't something that will work on every case. Certain cases it will work on, certain cases it won't give the result that is required by the coroner. And even if you have a MRI report and he may not determine the cause of death, which means that the coroner won't accept it and he will then ask for an invasive autopsy. So if that is an option, we should explore it as an option. For example, the people that are closest to us in terms of their rituals and rites for the deceased are the Jewish people. And in places like Bolton and Manchester, they've had the MRI scan option available since the 80s. Okay? So rather than go under the knife, they actually go through an MRI scanner, and like I mentioned previously, a radiologist can actually determine, not actually determine, but it's the coroner that eventually determines the cause of death, but they can look at the findings of the radiologist and determine the cause of death from that. So if we can avoid an invasive autopsy, then I would say that that would be the best option that we can take. But again, for babies, it doesn't work. For those people that have had any form of metal plates or joints replaced, it doesn't work for them. For accidents, death during an accident, it doesn't apply to them either. Any other? Inshallah. In that case, Jazakumullah khair. Thank you for joining us, inshallah. I hope and pray that it was of benefit, inshallah.
And I hope you have all enjoyed it. If you have opted to offer as volunteer to our funeral services, inshallah, our aim now is to give you some real life experience by participating in Ghusls. So inshallah, we'll have a pool of all the volunteers registered who have consented for this, and inshallah we'll be in touch with you and give you an opportunity to take part in real Ghusl so that you can consolidate all your knowledge that you've learned. It has been excellent training and lecture. Thank you so much, Mr. Zawad. Thank you. Jazakallah khair.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل على محمد